Hello.
Emile, my brother, how you doing?
Not bad. How are you?
I am blessed, man. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for taking a few seconds with me. Brother, before jumping in, I just want to kind of tell everybody who you are, what you do. So Emile Ghessen, he is a conflict documentary journalist, and he just put out a movie talking about the war in Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh, which is something really warm to my heart, obviously being Armenian. So thank you very much for being on with me. And I'm just going to present myself to your audience. My name is Christopher Dedeyan. I am a professional speaker and a peak performance business and life coach. Brother, first and foremost, how does it feel being back at home for you in the UK, London, after doing a long tour in North America and spending a lot of time with Armenians?
Wet and cold. Classic British weather. But then again, I was in Canada for a bit, so I got used to the cold. But yeah, no, it's good to be home. It's been a long time being away. However, as anyone who knows who goes on tours and stuff, is that when you come home and the momentum stops, it soon gets boring. So, but we've got a lot of work ahead of us still. We've just announced that we're doing London, a screening in London on the 26th of November, which is going well. A lot of people are interested. A lot of people want to come to London, especially non-Armenians, because my following before this was mainly predominantly non-Armenians. So a lot of people, especially a lot of my military friends, the veterans and everything, they all want to support to come along with this. So there's going to be a massive amount of non-Armenians coming. So I'm looking forward to it.
So that is amazing. And that's like the main thing for us within our cultures. Obviously, the Armenians know the Armenian story, what's happened with the war and so on and so forth. But our goal is to put it out there and people that don't know the story. So when there's non-Armenians, it's so much more of a pleasure for us because then they get to know our story. And that's actually one of the questions that I got from my community when they found out that you were going to be on today on Friday Flow, is that what did you know about Armenia before finding out of this conflict? And then after you found out what Armenians were, what was your perception of that?
Well, I clearly knew what Armenia was. I knew about the geopolitical situation because a lot of my previous documentaries and my previous work and I do a lot of guest speaking. So I talk about geopolitics as well, about influence of certain regions and the Caucasus. So I knew a bit about Armenia. Clearly didn't know what I know now. I know a lot more because spending so much time there. But obviously, since spending 10 months actually in physical Armenia, I understand the culture very well. I understand the political side of things to a certain degree. Politics, Armenian politics is a murky water, which I don't try to get involved in because it's very diverse and it's controversial, especially for Armenians. So yeah, my experience with the Armenians now is I have a great knowledge of what the culture, just really the people, traditions, and how things are in Armenia and the diaspora. So yeah, I'm an official Armenian resident,
I love
which
that.
is like quite ironic.
I love that. And that question, by the way, was from Aden. So I'm glad that we got that. And in that regards, I actually have a question with this as well. Once you found out that there was this conflict, how come you decided to report it on the side of Armenia? Did you try to report it on the side of Azerbaijan, or right off the bat that you found out this was happening and you just put on your backpack with your camera and you knew that you were going towards the Armenia side? What was that ideology and that approach for you?
So whenever there's a war going on, because I go to war zones, so many people, whenever there's a war, always message me, say, what's going on with this? Can you explain what's going on? I don't really know what's going on. What's the geopolitical situation? So when this started, my brother's partner's Armenian. So when I was looking online at all the videos that were going, I was sending them to her to translate, going, what they're saying in this video. And she's like, oh, they're talking Russian, or this is Azeris, or this is Armenian soldiers. I didn't really know the difference between the uniforms and such. So I was just watching online like everyone else was. And then obviously my first documentary, I filmed with the Kurds and international volunteers that went to Iraq and Syria. So I came under a lot of attack doing that when I was filming with the Kurds from Turkish people saying, oh, you're spreading propaganda from the Turkish perspective and the Kurdish perspective. I was like, no, I'm just telling a story. So clearly when a NATO member, Turkey, joined sides with Azerbaijan in this war, my father's a Christian Syrian from Damascus. I still have family still in Damascus, so I know about the persecution of the Christians in that region. So when it came to where I was going to tell this story, I was naturally drawn to the Armenian side, especially because Armenia is the underdog. It's surrounded on either side by enemies, and to the south it's got Iran, and to the north it's got Georgia, which is anti-Russian. So it was a natural for me to go to Armenia. I just felt more of a draw to go there, especially with the culture and history of Armenia. And now, yeah, so the documentary 45 Days is told from the Armenian perspective. Some people, like the Azeris, are trying to call it a propaganda documentary. They haven't seen it to question that, to even have an opinion on it. And I welcome them to come and watch the documentary. I welcome anyone to come and watch the documentary. So yeah, you've seen it yourself. It's a humanization documentary. There's no politics in there. Even certain groups of the diaspora that have tried to discredit this and boycott this, and there's still certain diaspora political groups that are trying to boycott this documentary. They haven't seen it. And I'll say, come along and watch it. Because if you're Armenian, you clearly want to champion Armenia. It's not about the politics. It's about the people and the soldiers that you're supposed to be championing. So, yeah, it'd be great to show it in London. We're going to have a great crowd there, especially, like I was saying, especially a non-Armenian predominantly crowd, which is great. And then later, maybe in the beginning of December, we're going to be doing a 10-day online launch. As well as on the 26th, we're doing 7 days, 3 showings a day in Hollywood. So in the normal cinemas, so people in Hollywood and Los Angeles, you can watch it again. So we've got a lot going on because we've entered it into the Academy Awards, the Oscars. So at the moment, we're just working on our marketing campaign.
Okay, so we have a lot to unpack, and we're going to unpack everything you just said over there. So thank you for all of that. Definitely, like you said, you had an approach to the Christian story and what's happening in the Caucasus, so that's why you did it through there. And in regards to actually doing the filming and so on, this was actually a question from Stephanie. What was the hardest thing that you had to film, or kind of shocked you while you were filming, or it hit you in a way emotionally that you didn't expect throughout that whole process?
Yes, I served 12 years in the British military. I fought in Iraq and Afghanistan for several years. So war is something I'm used to, accustomed to. And some people think that's bizarre if they've never been to war zones. But when you've been in war zones and you've always been around guns and weapons, it's just the norm to you. So really, the frontline stuff was just normal for me, seeing soldiers normal. The hardest part for me was after the trilateral agreement was signed on November the 10th, is when areas of Artsakh were given away, the territories were given away, and being around civilians who had been told, you've got 2 weeks to pack your home up and leave. And that was the hardest part for me, being around the civilians that were affected by this war, ones who aren't involved in the politics. They weren't involved in the fighting, but they're the ones who suffered the most, really. And so knowing that is the people of Armenia as well that been around mothers and fathers and grandparents whose sons were off at war, and they didn't know anything about where they are and what's going on because communication was limited. So yeah, it's the humanization that really affected me and impacted me. And you've seen in the documentary yourself when they've got the mass exodus from Artsakh and people burning their homes down and stuff like that. And I'm stood there with a guy and I'm trying to interview, and I'm just like, what's there to say? There's nothing nothing I can say here. And as a filmmaker, I just don't think I'm doing myself any credit trying to quiz you on questions, because there's nothing to say here. You're burning your home down. It doesn't get any worse than this. So they're the moments that are very emotional for me. Also filming with families, like Sarian Gore's father. You saw that interview. That's a very emotional, touching interview. A father who went to the front line to find his son, and his son ended up dying in his arms. These are impactful stories. These are stories we're trying to tell to the audience to show the reality of war is, yeah, men go to fight, but the actual real reality of it is there's so many other people that are suffering and will continue suffering.
That is so interesting. And, you know, the thing that you just mentioned in regards to that part that in the documentary that you're kind of talking to somebody that's legit burning down their house, that they've been there for generations and they have to move out and become a diaspora from that area. Even though you didn't ask a lot of questions, I think for me personally, it was one of the most powerful parts of the video and documentary, because it was so obvious what was happening. So in those moments, you don't even need to talk about it, but it's really interesting that that was the moments that kind of hit for you. And Emile, more on your end, like you said, you've been in wars as a soldier, and now you're documenting that. For you personally, do you find it a bit more, not to say normal, but more comfortable in an environment of war compared to the normal life? Or is that a far stretch in itself? Because that's something that certain people have spoken about, that, like, you know, they're more comfortable when they have their gun as a soldier, obviously. Then when they come to civilian life, they feel a bit more difficult on that end. So what's your perspective with that?
No, I don't. I've done a lot of fighting in my days. So when I left after 12 years and being a commando, is fighting was out my system. So like my first documentary, Robin Hood Complex, is men who go to Iraq and Syria to fight Islamic State. And a lot of these men, some of them were ex-military, former military veterans who are now fighting against Islamic State. And like one of their main reasons was they never saw any real action when they were in the military. So they're looking for that sense of adventure. Of course, me going to war zones is an adventure to a certain degree, going out there, testing myself, pushing myself to the limits. But no, I feel very comfortable in civilian life. I don't suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, even though I do obviously have like flashbacks. I remember things, I have dreams and stuff, but it doesn't affect my day-to-day life as such. It's the same as anyone who's been in traumatic experiences. So no, I prefer being in normal life than in war zones. But there's obviously there is it's my job. I go out and I enjoy doing what I do. I enjoy going out and telling the stories and finding, like I call it breadcrumb journalism, when you're following the breadcrumbs. You have a rough idea what you want to film and what you want to achieve, but it never works that way. It's not a movie where we have a script. You're just out there, you're finding people, you're meeting people, and you go, okay, well, I need to find someone who's a prisoner of war, for example, like the two guys we've got in the documentary, Haik and Razmik. And I was looking for prisoners of war, and it just came a chance. I was smoking some hookah, having a cup of tea, and someone goes to me, do you want to interview a POW? And I was like, bingo, I've been looking for POWs, where are they? And then within an hour he's turning up, we're smoking together, we're having a drink, and we're talking about the interview that we're going to take place the next day. So it is, yeah, very much I enjoy that kind of style of just going out there, not knowing what's going on. I've never been in a world where I've had routine. Even though in the military you have routines to a certain degree, you're very much, things change very quickly, and that's being in war zones, making documentaries, things do change very quickly also. So it's natural for me.
Okay, that makes sense. So essentially you're kind of going in the flow, and no pun intended,
Yeah,
that's the name of my show,
yeah.
but just kind of going with what happens and rolling with the punches. And in that regards, was there any time, a moment that you were actually afraid of your life at a high level, or you're very much a professional that you know where to go and where to push the limits and not position you and your crew in dangerous situations too much?
So when I was filming during the war, I was on my own. It was just me. It was just easier being on my own because I can move quicker. I can get access easier. The thing is, though, if you're on the front line area, for example, where you know it's a front line, you generally know, okay, right, the enemy roughly in that area. So it's easier to go, okay, well, I can control what's going on here. What was going on in this war was the drone warfare, and we talk heavily about it in the documentary, is that the whole of Artsakh was a front line. There was nowhere in the region that wasn't a part of the front line, because the drones were everywhere. They could launch anywhere. They were using the drones to observation, to watch and call in rockets. So really anywhere you could have been targeted anywhere. Every time you get in a vehicle, it could be targeted. So yeah, you're always on edge. You're always thinking what's going on. And in the documentary part as well, we show when I'm in the hotel, because that was the only place really journalists could stay in hotels, bizarrely in a war zone, is that there was rounds coming in, there was bombardments all the time, but then one morning went out, and then it's about 150 meters down the road where the rounds were landing. So is that you never know where you are and how, if it's going to hit you. If you're targeted, you're targeted. It's just the way you got to roll with it. It's not about being scared. It's just about taking chances and do calculated risk, always doing risk assessments. Like even when I'm walking down the road and there's no threat, I'm always looking, if we do come under attack here, where am I going to go? Where's a bit of cover for me to hide? That's just my natural thought process.
Yeah. So yeah, you have that natural, like you said, you're like, what's the exit strategy, and wherever I'm going, where can I put my back towards? And you did mention in the documentary, which I wanted to highlight, you just mentioned as well, the drone aspect. And you're like, this war was a drone war, and it's really created a certain approach to other countries to look at it and be like, hey, how do we do wars with drone? So why was it so important in this regards, with the drone being heavily used on the Azeri side against Armenia, that the other countries learn from it? Now, when you were saying that it's going to change the landscape of wars in the future, talk to me a bit more about that. How so?
Well, we fought in Afghanistan for over 20 years and also Iraq for over a decade. And political pressure is put on governments when they're involved in wars, when soldiers are coming home in body bags. So obviously for all militaries, they want to move to technology. They want to use more drone warfare, electronic warfare, because then they have an easier advantage to continue their objective without public opinion. So when it comes to drone warfare, is if you're launching drones that if it gets shot out of the sky, no one's dying, no pilots are dying. There's no one saying, okay, you shot down a drone, you've killed 2 pilots. Now it's, oh, we just shot down a drone, it's technology. So militaries are always looking for, even like the militaries. I was in the British Commandos, and I saw one of my friends today who's still serving. He's talking about the future commando force and how they've adapted, and they're using drones now, they're using more surveillance techniques and stuff. Is militaries are always looking for new ways to advance to win wars quicker. So very much so is the drone program for the rest of the world was watching what was going on in Artsakh was very interesting, because they're going, these arms companies, Turkish and Israeli arms companies that sold weapons to Azerbaijan, it's a testing ground, and some people don't really realize that, but arms industries are massive. They have massive political pressure by lobbying and stuff. So to actually use weapon systems like drones that we see in a smaller scale used en masse is a learning curve for a lot of countries, because now these arms companies have the data because they've used them for real, so they can now sell these weapons to other countries. Is all the world's militaries, the British, the Americans, the German, all European, even Middle Eastern, like the Saudis, everything, were watching what was going on there, because now they're going to start using drones. They saw how effective and how quick you can defeat a military on the ground without getting body bags. Of course, a lot of the Azeris died, and the Azeris aren't releasing their actual figures. But the drone campaign was rife, and it was very effective.
And that's interesting, because you did mention a couple of things with that. Is like, if there wasn't a drone aspect so lopsided, because I don't even know if Armenia had drones. I'm guessing no, or very limited. Yeah,
limited.
So
yeah,
limited. So you said that if that wasn't there, it would have been a complete different experience with the result of the war in itself. So it was very lopsided. Now, as well, when you were saying that other countries were looking into what's happening in this particular moment with the drones and the war, there was a person at the end of your documentary, I'm so sorry I forgot his name, he was talking about the main countries could have came in and stopped this
Eric,
war. Say his name, sorry?
I always pronounce it wrong. Eric.
Okay, so Eric was saying, he's like, we realize as Armenians that we're alone and nobody's going to come save us and support us and so on and so forth. Why do you think that is? Like, did you figure anything out with that aspect? I'm sure you heard kind of some noise. What was your opinion on that? Why wasn't anybody coming and helping us throughout that time when we knew that this was something that shouldn't be happening? This was against social norms, let's call it.
Yeah, the world was busy. And we even have Serge Tankin, who talks about what was going on. He talks about the diaspora, but he touched on it. Is COVID, the media were busy with COVID. There was the US elections. Everyone was busy doing their own thing. That when this regional war turns up, is many people from afar weren't really interested in what was going on. The issue you have is, I can go out the street here in the UK, and there's a lot in Armenia, there's a lot of anti-British rhetoric, actually, because people see, well, mainly from the diaspora, see Britain as a supporter of Azerbaijan. But I can walk down the road here and speak to people and go to them, where's Armenia on the map? And they probably wouldn't know. I'll go, where's Azerbaijan on the map? They wouldn't even heard of Azerbaijan. So that's the issue we've got. So when you've got news outlets that are telling stories, if the audience that they're telling these stories to don't even know what's going on, they don't really want to tell them that stories. They keep it more regional, something that's more important to what they think their audience is. So the world was very silent, like through the media. Politically, the world's very silent in the sense that especially NATO countries were silent, because Turkey signed allegiance to Azerbaijan. And you know what's happening in the world when the world NATO members speak out to Turkey, there's always a backlash from it. So I think they were very restricted from coming forward because they didn't want to annoy Turkey. I think they didn't think the war was going to last 44 days. They probably thought it was a small little regional war that would be over in 4 or 5 days, a week at the most. It also prolonged. France was the only country really that was vocal about anything, but even then it was just a barking dog. They didn't really do anything. So very much Armenia was on its own, and they were left. The world just turned a blind eye to what was going on for the whole 44 days. The only really regional power in the war involved was Russia. And you even see people in the documentary talk about it. I even traveled into Artsakh with the Russians. I just followed them. So very much they were the key player in what was going on here. And also there's an underlying issue with the Russians, and what the Russians' main aim was. What was their agenda? Yeah. Why didn't the Russians get involved overtly? But obviously politically, Russia and Turkey are also having their own little thing that's going on. They've been dealing with the Black Sea, with Crimea, with allowing Russian ships into that region. Also what's going on in Syria between the Russians and the Turks in the northern region. politically they can't go against each other, so they have to have some form of negotiation and diplomacy. So really much, yeah, Armenia was just sold out by the world.
That's Thank you for that answer. Really, definitely clarified some things. And I want to ask you two last questions because I do want to be respectful for your time here. So, as you were looking towards this aspect of seeing that, hey, Armenia is alone, and really we got attacked because, like you said, they were very much conscious that the rest of the world was quiet and it was strategic. And you mentioned that in the documentary, which I find very interesting. So that means that it's going to happen in some way, shape, or form in the future again. So what do you think Armenia has to do to be better prepared towards intellectually, finance, war, army, and so on, for this to potentially be ready and not have the same outcome in the future when this might happen again?
Yeah, this is a very subjective answer. This is my opinion is I think diplomacy to build greater alliances with other nations. So if you are attacked, they will be more vocal, more active to go, right, this is not correct. This shouldn't be happening because we're an alliance. I think diplomacy is a massive issue, but obviously that comes with limitations now that the Russians are very much in control of Artsakh. They very much got more influence in Armenia now. I think the Armenians need to start training their military to a higher standard, don't rely on volunteer soldiers, have better investments on training into commanders. From my experience, there was a lack of leadership from the Armenian side because a lot of the old generals and commanders are oligarchs. They're still working off that Soviet mentality. They haven't adapted to what we would call NATO standard and how to fight warfare in a modern warfare. They're still thinking of how we move tanks across a battlefield rather than thinking about different kind of kinetic operations. So I think, yeah, they need a massive amount of investment, but that's limited because Armenia is a small country. Do you think of like any Canadian city or American city, or even like London's 9 million people, the population of Armenia is between 2 and 3 million. It's a small GDP. There's limited money that can be invested into the armed forces. So that then comes once again with diplomacy on building alliances with partners to go, okay, if we're attacked, are you going to support us? Because we can't really physically defend ourselves effectively because we're so small. And that's the issue, is Armenia is a prison of its own geography. It's a landlocked country in a region in the Caucasus that's surrounded by countries that aren't so friendly to it. And Armenia over the years has got smaller and smaller and smaller. And this is why so many people from the diaspora feel so under threat, because the reason they are diasporan is because the genocide of 1915, so living elsewhere in the world, and they see their borders as such getting smaller and under attack. So I totally understand it, but I think the only way around it is diplomacy and strengthening of the military. But that takes time. That's not a quick and easy solution. That's not going to happen over 1-2 years. It takes a long time to retrain and equip the military.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying. Diplomacy, I think, should be in the forefront. And then, like you said, restructuring our organization within the army. And I don't know anything about that, but what you're saying kind of made sense with all that aspect. And one thing that actually, if you permit, the part in the movie that really hit me the most, which I don't know if it hit a lot of people, but it was at the end of the movie when you were interviewing a diaspora that went back to Armenia and was playing with the kids at the end, was throwing snowballs. And you asked the kid, when you ask the kid with Gato, exactly, when you ask the kid, hey, are you going to fight this war when you grow up? Because his father has and his grandfather has. And he answered, not yes, but he's like, if I grow up, I will, which it hit me. Because I'm like, the reality is that they know that it's coming. And if they get to that certain point, they will do that. And that it shook me to my core, that aspect, because I'm like, hey, we're blessed being in North America, not having these aspects. Not everybody is, right? So that's one thing. And I wanted to talk about the aspect of the documentary being an Oscar potentially within that realm. So what can we do as the Armenian community to push this more, help you out to potentially have a high chance of winning an Oscar and so on and so forth? I don't know what the qualifications are. So can you talk to us about that, how we can support you even more to bring this in the forefront within a mainstream media?
Yeah, so we've entered into the Academy Awards, we've entered into other film festivals, and we're also speaking to distributors for like a mass distribution. Is the Academy Awards, the Oscars, it's a long shot, it's a massive long shot for us. We know it's a long shot. We're up against a lot of documentary, we're going for Best Feature Documentary. We're going up against the likes of Netflix, HBO, Amazon, these ones who invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into marketing campaigns to get it out there. We clearly don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars for marketing and promotion. From our tour that we were doing, we've donated $45,000 to our 4 charities that we're working with. The rest of the money was paying for the theatres, paying for the tour, as well as paying for what we can from the marketing. And that's what our money from the tour is going towards, is paying for our marketing, is because it's an expensive campaign to get it even to be considered into the Oscars. If it weren't expensive, everyone would enter the Oscars. And that's why we've had to tick all these boxes in order to get in. People have gone, why can't we see the documentary? We want to watch it. It's like, we have to control the distribution, because if we go against anything, we're going to be disqualified. Not only that, we very much know the second, if we do get selected on the 21st of December to be shortlisted for the Oscars, we know Azerbaijan and Turkey will be investigating everything we've done and seeing how they can push forward for us to be disqualified. So we have to do everything by the book. And that's why I'm investing in a legal team, a PR team, so we get everything right. Otherwise, we don't want to get to the stage where you've been shortlisted into the last 15 and then get told, oh, we've heard that you paperwork was wrong, X, Y, and Z, and get disqualified. So really the main emphasis that the support we need is people spreading the word, continue telling everyone about the documentary. If anyone knows anyone who, like, film critics that want to write about it, send them in touch with me. Any news companies that want to talk about it, because when the judges go to sit down to look at our documentary, they'll get a private screen of it, they will be looking online to look for Google. They're looking in to see who said what about it. And as humans, even though these critics, they see people talking positively about it and there's a lot of attention about it, they'll get a warm, fuzzy feeling and go, actually, yeah, there's a lot of people here that are interested in it. If there's no noise about it, they'll be like, oh, it's not that great. People don't want to see it. So let me look at this other one that's got a lot of attention. So really spreading the word, just making noise about 45 Days to Fight for a Nation is really what we need. From the people of the diaspora and also non-Armenians that watched it. Really is just pumping it out there. Keep the momentum of this going until December time, until we find out if we're going to be selected or not.
Okay. So I love what you just said, and I'm just going to clarify. Call to action to everybody that's listening to this replay or whatever the case is. Find the people that can be noticed as a tipping point, like you said, that are journalists, that have access to media or whatever the case is, to get them to put it more out there. I guess IMDb as well, if we could go rate it 10 stars, and anything that we could push all of that aspect, because we're going to have to really get together as an Armenian community. And Emile, just the last thing that I want to say here real quick. I'm sure you have been told this 100 times over and over again, but it would be like a disservice if I don't say it as well. Thank you very much from all the Armenian people, whoever I could say. I am so happy, glad, and proud of what you put forward. I know the effort that you put into play, and we don't take this lightly, the Armenians, because we've gone through so much. And when we see it, and especially, I'm so blessed that you're not Armenian. I didn't even know. My sister told me, oh, he's not Armenian. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, that's even more interesting, because it's told from a different perspective. Towards if it was an Armenian that was directing it or telling the story, they could be like, oh, there is more, saving to one side to another. So thank you very much, Emile, for everything that you're doing. If you need anything, please do not hesitate to ask me. It will be my true pleasure to help you in any shape or way. And as well, any comments you guys have, leave it down below. Me and Emile will go back and answer it. 1 week later, it will be on my YouTube channel. We'll do the same. So that being said, is there anything else that you want to say, share with us before we?
I just want to thank you for coming along in Montreal and supporting as well, and all the people that have come out to watch it. Thousands of people now seen the documentary. We screened it in Armenia, the USA, East Coast, West Coast, and Canada, and in 2 weeks' time in London. The support's been massive. However, we do have a small percentage of hate that's coming from the diaspora, from certain individuals, and I just don't understand why they're trying to boycott this and try to derail it. What they're doing is counterproductive for the country they're supposed to love. So I would say anyone who you see as trying to discredit 45 Days is call them out and tell them, what are you doing? Go watch the film and then form an opinion, rather than taking 40-second sound clips or comments they've seen on Twitter and trying to discredit, because they're only doing a self-harm, really. As a collective, Armenia was the underdog in this war. 45 Days, the documentary and the Oscars campaign, is the underdog as well. So we're going to continue fighting to get this going. And the support's been massive. I would like to, once again, I've said it several times, I want to thank everyone who donated to the GoFundMe account, which funded production and post-production. Without you people, we've never been able to make the film. And also the people that are buying tickets to come to the theatre, we thank you, because without you, we couldn't continue marketing and promoting this to get it to a further, a big audience and to the non-Armenian communities. I thank everyone for all their support, their massive support. And for me, I'm very humbled and thankful for that.
Thank you, Emile. You're officially always an Armenian in our heart from now on. Whatever other projects you'll do as well, you'll keep us posted. And thank you for coming on this show and just blessing us with your time and your stories.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Have a blessed
Cheers, mate.
Ciao, ciao.
Take care, bye.